What happens when the fire in your belly, that entrepreneurial drive you have, leads to what others would think is the perfect life, only for you to realize that you have actually wrecked your life, and now you must resurrect your life? Hey, it's JR, and in today's episode of the Level Up Business Podcast, I'd like to introduce you to Tom Fedro, as Tom takes us on a journey that led him to become the entrepreneur he is today. You see, Tom's journey started with a high-flying corporate climb where he was chasing the IPO dream, he was closing multi-million-dollar deals, and he was living what looked to be like the ideal life. But all that came crashing down, and that's when Tom had to make a choice. He could stay broken, or he could resurrect his life and rebuild from the ground up. This is when Tom, though, chose to reprioritize his life. He put his faith, his family, his fitness at the center of everything that he would do, and why this shift transformed and restored his health, it restored his relationships, and it gave him a second shot at life and leadership as an entrepreneur. But first, are you a visionary entrepreneur? Are you a visionary entrepreneur who wants to elevate your brand and expand your influence, increase your impact? If this is you, you're the reason we're on a mission here at Level Up Business. You're the reason we're on a mission to amplify the voices of visionary entrepreneurs by unlocking their wisdom, sharing their stories, and publishing their books. So, when you are ready to level up your business and your life, send me a text, 832-240-1922. That's because I want to teach you how to amplify your voice so that your mission, your message, are seen, known, and heard by those who need your help the most. Now, let's get ready to learn. Let's get ready to grow. Let's get ready to level up together with Tom. Tom, it's so good to join for a conversation today. You are just doing incredible things as an entrepreneur, but I want to go deep in something that you had shared in our community, in our group, and elevated. And I thought it was very important to hear this story, to share this wisdom so that others can learn from your experience and then also level up as well, because it impacted me in a positive way. And before we get too far there, I always want to start off on a positive note. What is good for you right now, personally, professionally? It's your pick to get started.
Oh man, I just became a grandfather. My oldest son with his wife, they had a beautiful little daughter. First female Fedro in 64 years. You know, all we've got is boys, and so little Elena is now a part of the Fed Nation. So that's probably the biggest news recently. But just blessed. I've got 4 boys and a beautiful wife. We're just having a ball. I've got one boy playing baseball over in Hawaii for the University of Hawaii, another boy playing tennis, getting ready to play in college, and 2 boys out paying taxes and doing their job as citizens. So I'm just a very fortunate man. So
well, congratulations on that. And I love the framing of Fed Nation. Like, I like that. It had a nice little ring to it.
Absolutely.
We gotta probably come back and you and I explore that. Where can we go with that framing? But I want to go into an area that you had shared in a video and elevated. Your story, your perspective, and to use your words, you nuked your life, or something that I've heard before. I had to wreck my life to resurrect my life. And roll us back into just to set the contextual stage for people watching and listening, other entrepreneurs.
Yeah, sure. Yeah, and I appreciate your story. There's a lot of parallels here, but yeah, I mean, when I say I nuked my life, I came out of college, went to the University of Denver, had a great experience there, and got out and hit the corporate world with a fire in my belly, man. I wanted to make it happen. I wanted to chase the brass ring and make that money and rock and roll. And along the way, I got married, had 2 beautiful boys, and was climbing the ladder. I mean, idyllic life in Denver, Colorado, and I got the opportunity as a VP of Sales and Marketing with a small startup company we're going to take this baby public. We're going to ride the rocket, and we had some amazing technology to do just that. So I basically strapped an airplane on my back, and I was out. I mean, I was drinking in Taiwan with Taiwan Telecom. I was in Orange in the UK. I was singing karaoke with Austria Telecom. We were selling big $1 million deals, and I mean, the flight attendants knew me by name, flying first class, just everything in your mid 30s, it was like, this is the life, right? But at the end of the day, 2.5 years on the road globally, we were 24 hours from being on the NASDAQ, going public, went through the entire process to the pricing call. And, I'm counting my money on my calculator. Boom, boom. I was 7 figures when you're in your 30s. I was like, what are you kidding me? This is in the 90s. That's a lot of money. The SEC had some questions. They pulled our IPO. The banks got scared. Everybody ran away. We ended up selling that company for a third of the value 6 months later. Nobody made any money. I'm crushed. My wife says, that's it. Moved to, got divorced. My 2 young boys, 6 and 3, want to be closer to her parents. Had to drive them up in the U-Haul to Iowa. I get a job in California, and I'm immediately sued for non-compete by the company that bought us. I'm sitting in my rental, looking in the mirror. It's like, you're broke. Your kids are 1,800 miles away. You're out of shape. How could you be so selfish, man? And this is like, I'm in the crucible. God put me in the fire, and that's where it kind of turned around, where I had all my priorities were jacked up. And it became very clear that to me, where, I ended up, I was on a plane every 3 to 4 weeks seeing my kids. And then when they got old enough, they were coming out in the summers. And, it was all about faith and family's got to be number one, healthy
Right.
wellness is number 2, wealth building, that's dead last. That's number 3. And, once that became clear and I got that clarity, I stopped drinking. I stopped traveling. And, I got another shot at life to get married to a wonderful woman, Carrie, who you've met. And, 4 years after that, and we had 2 more boys. And I got another shot where I'm coaching all their sports. And, I'm at every single game. And, God just, it just worked out amazingly well, and here we are today, where got out of corporate, became an entrepreneur, so I could have my own schedule and live life the way I wanted to live it, and I could not be more blessed. So happy to be here, but life's not all rainbows and butterflies, man. You got to go through some struggle and pain, and it's the lessons you learn along the way, and you can share with others that count.
Well, that's why I wanted to start with your perspective here, because that does set the table. It does set some context for others, because if I think about all of the entrepreneurs that I've talked to, whether it's on the podcast or coaching with them, there's some sort of underlying story behind the story. There's some sort of underlying pain, but it's by transforming that pain into purpose, it's by transforming that pain into potential, into power. That's how we create that second chapter, that next act. And I want to roll back, because once again, I think time is important here. You mentioned that you were in your 30s, and you felt like you were about to make it, and then life happened differently. The stock deal fell apart, and then the marriage. And it's like, if I think about where I was in that same time period, I was in my mid 30s, and my wife, like, we were financially doing extremely well as an entrepreneur, and she'd been with me on this ride since day one. And then she said, it's the family or the business. And I had to make a choice, because we had 2 kids too.
Yeah.
And so I said, I need help. And I did, in a lot of different areas of my life. I was battling addictions, and no one saw it from the outside. Everyone thought I had like the perfect life, which was not the case. It was so dark, it was so hollow, it was so soulless, I even think, on the inside, that I was trying to fill the hole with all of these other things, whether it was money, alcohol, porn. It didn't matter what it was. It was just trying to fill this empty void. And come back to where you were in your mid 30s or in your 30s, and you had this, if you go back, because people have asked me the same thing, would I change anything? Knowing what I know now, would I do anything different? I don't want to give you my answer on this. I want to, like, what was the big lessons you took, and would you change anything, knowing what you know now?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, what I know now and what I try to profess to my own kids and anybody that'll listen is it comes down to your priorities in life. That's going to drive your behavior, right? And if you've got those in the wrong spot, if you're working toward the wrong goals and you got them in the wrong order, you're going to have problems. And I can attest to that very clearly. So, I mean, if somebody, and in fact, that's, what I hope to do in my second half is exactly what you said, to be able to try to get in front of enough people that are at that spot, right before, they're making those decisions that are going to ruin their future, to have somebody that's been there with the scar tissue that says, look, take the time now to understand what you have with your family, with your health, so much more important than chasing the money. And to have that kind of conversation with as many people as possible.
I want to pause right there because priorities, if you go back to where you were, because I think about whenever I started out as an entrepreneur, my number one priority was the finances. It was make the money, get the 7 figures. I mean, 7, we did 7. Let's start trying to go to 8, right?
Yeah.
But then you start if there's not a strong foundation, things will eventually begin to crack. It's like if you don't build if you build the house on sand, it's going to fall when the storms of life come. But if you build the foundation on the rock, then you have something that can withstand the storms of life. So for me, my foundation, yes, it was financially driven, but at the same exact time, everything else in my life was starting to crack and fall apart. Going back to where you were, you mentioned finances, but then you flipped it around. You said, well, let's reorder this. Let's reprioritize faith, fitness, family. Like, how do you prioritize in your life, and how would you recommend others prioritize their life? Because they might be listening to this thinking, I'm all in on the money right now. That's why I became an entrepreneur, was to create financial freedom. But I was talking to an entrepreneur in Germany last week, and he was like, I've been doing this thing for 10 years, and he's in his mid-30s, and I actually might send him this conversation so you can almost, you have someone you're speaking to now. I go, are you not financially free right now to do what you want when you want? Yes, then how much is going to be enough? And we were talking about prioritizing faith and fitness and family and friends, relationships, having some fun in your life. Yeah, you got your finances. And then he said something, well, all of those F's, if you will, that leads to a fulfilled life. It leads to fulfillment, which I thought that was a really great perspective. So why do you think we as entrepreneurs, we might get stuck over indexing on one area, typically the finances, and then we let everything else, whether it be the faith, the family, the fitness, the friends, all of that starts to fall apart?
Yeah, I'd say for me it was probably ego and pride, because the flashy cars, the big house, that's what people see. And, when you're focused on that, that's where you find your identity. And that's the problem, right? Because there's always going to be somebody with more money. There's always going to be somebody doing better. And, if you start fixating on something that can explode, just like in my story, where you're that close after working that long, and it's a freaking vapor. I mean, it doesn't even, it's gone, and you've put your whole trust in that, and then everything else, all the other things around you, your family and your relationships, and you look around and they don't exist. You don't have the connection because you put everything into this chasing of the wind, as Solomon said. And it's a basic, stuff from the Bible that, over and over and over. And so that I didn't see it until it exploded in my face. And, I think that's where our job, and from what you've gone through, and it's so cool. You're able to save your family and your marriage and everything, and get to where you are today, to be able to relate that to young people that are in the same spot. This is incredibly important that you look at where you're spending your time and what your priorities are, because that's going to drive your behavior. And then to put the tools in place, your morning routines, your habits that are going to drive you to what you really want in life, right? Fulfillment, as you just said.
What was driving you? I know the it was obviously the finances, but then was there something deeper that was perhaps the influence to that? Because that's what I'm identifying is there's always something behind the something. Like for me, in hindsight, it was my family of origin, my family's relationship with money, my parents' relationship with money. In fact, my mom coming from extreme poverty, and those belief systems that got passed down to me that I said, no, I'm going to do something almost exactly opposite and over index in the other areas. Was there something that you, in hindsight, have perspective on now that perhaps was driving that behavior back then? Because, like you said, beliefs drive behavior.
Yeah. No, I think we're like brothers from another mother, man. No, my family situation, I had a wonderful parents. My dad was a fighter pilot in the Air Force and a high school
What
teacher.
did you fly?
He flew in World War II. He flew P-51s, which was unbelievable. And then in Korea, he flew F-80s, F-86s, and
Okay.
then he ended up flying Saberliners, when he came back to the States. But just had a ball. I mean, he was the real deal. He was a Top Gun kind of guy. So, that was really cool. But we never had any money. I mean, we were all very much middle class and had a great upbringing. But I kind of got enamored with the cash. I started selling golf clubs in high school, and I started making a lot more money than my landscaping friends, and talking to stockbrokers, and they're driving the cars and everything they went with. And I said, I'm going there. I'm doing this. This is what I want. I want to be like these guys. They come in and drop $1,000 on a set of golf clubs like that. Nothing. This was in the 80s, and it's like that's a lot of money. That's what I'm going to do. And I pursued that, and it became a whole career in sales, and making as much money as possible. And then the stock thing, how to become an instant millionaire. I just got, it was like a monkey going after the gold brass ring that once he puts his hand on it, he's caught. He's in the trap, and I fell for it, and it cost me a lot. It cost me a lot in a lot of pain, a lot of relationship issues. And thankfully my older sons and I get along. They're my best friends now, and even my former wife. We get along well, but it's like a lot of that was unnecessary. Had I had my priorities straight and at an earlier age. So.
You bring up a very important point earlier, and I want to loop back around to this. And this literally came up in a coaching conversation today I was having with another entrepreneur, and he was like, I know where you've been. I've been following your story, and it's interesting. Like, I have no idea how many people have been watching, paying attention, whether that be on LinkedIn or in the elevated community. It's just fascinating to me because I just keep doing what I feel like I'm being called to do. And that is from a higher calling. That is from, I feel like God put this on my heart to go down this path and to really give other visionary entrepreneurs the opportunity to share their wisdom to help other people truly like level up in life, whether that be personally and or professionally. But we were talking about identity because he was like, I've got this business. It's a good business, but I don't feel like that's what I'm being called to do anymore. But I've also got so much identity wrapped around this thing. I'm having a hard time, going down this new path that he feels like he's being called to go down. Go back to the point on identity, and how did you recreate your identity starting from the inside yourself?
Yeah, I think there was no place to go but up, right? When it went through that process of losing everything and really getting squished into the I don't know, like you call it the crucible, but it was a tough time, and coming out of that, I just was looking at my physical self, my body. I was drinking too much. The travel had just worn me down. My body was a disaster, and so health became like, why are we doing this? Health has to be a big part of my life, and get back at it. And I'd been an athlete before, But my family, when I'm sitting in my apartment and my kids are 1,800 miles away, it's like, God dang it. I mean, I had it all, and I miss that. I got to fix this. Faith, family. Where I sit and I read the Bible and the scriptures and get back to church. I mean, I grew up in the church, and it was kind of like coming back around, and it just became very clear that my boys and my faith get to the gym, the rest will take care of itself, and that's the truth. That's what's happened. And there's a lot of tools that we've learned about in our lives that make that a lot clearer, and pathways to get there that I hope to share with other folks. But that's the basic tenet. Get your priorities straight and then move forward. Have your vision and make it happen. Just like what you're doing right now with your new business and where you're going. I mean, you're stepping out into the unknown and you're making it happen. I mean, that's what it takes.
Well, you bring up a very good point about your faith, but then also, and I want to loop back around to faith in just a moment as we start to wrap up. But you've brought up your health, your physical well-being a couple of times, and you've brought up the alcohol as well. Like, for example, I had to go sober, and I didn't realize I had a drinking problem. It's like I changed one addiction for another addiction. And then it wasn't until I started tracking how much alcohol I was drinking. It's like, oh, that's a lot of alcohol. And there was an app that I used. And then it was like, I remember it was December, I think it was like December 13th or 15th of 2023 that we went out and had a couple of old fashions for dinner with some friends, and we got back early, and we had some other friends who said, hey, come meet us at the local bar, and they had like 3 more old fashions like within an hour, not paying attention, just having a good time. And then I remember, like, I woke up the next day thinking, oh my gosh, I feel horrible. And then the next day I felt horrible, and then the next day, and I'm like, my future self is not going to thank me for this behavior today. And I just made a decision. I was like, that's it. And then I was like, I'm not going to drink for a week. I'm not going to drink. And then I got to a week. I was like, I'm not going to drink for a month. And I got to a month. I was like, okay, I'm going to go 90 days to 100 days. Okay, great. I got to that point. I felt better than I had ever felt because I probably had been drinking at that point from the age that I was like 17. And so, but still working out, still thinking I was taking care of my body, but in fact, I was probably destroying from the inside out. When it comes to reinventing your identity, like you said, you had a really, to get to the rock bottom, and then you're able to build from that, from a solid foundation with faith and fitness. What role has fitness played for you, even the drinking aspect of this, in your next chapter here?
Yeah, it's absolutely huge. And I think I had the same kind of epiphany as you when I got married the second time. I drank not nearly as much as I had in the past, but I drink, and we got pregnant, or my wife got pregnant, so she'd drink wine once in a while, so she stopped drinking, and so I just stopped drinking, kind of being a compadre. We're going to do this together. And at the time, I was training for my black belt in Taekwondo, and I was doing this running, and all of a sudden, I had clarity that I could, Saturday morning runs became enjoyable, and I loved it. And we had our son Mark, and I said, you know what, I'm done. And that was February. So I had my last drink. That was February 29th in 2004. So I'm 21 years ago. So it's like, boom, we're done. And it was a great decision. And but the whole physical piece became not an obsession. It just became a part of my daily life, where instead of going out to eat at lunch, I go to the gym. So I don't impact my family time. And if people want to go to lunch with me, they can come work out, or we'll talk on the phone. But it just became like every day, that's it. And it's been that way for years, and it's something I'll continue the rest of my life. And as a father now with 4 grown boys, it becomes very important to be their example, right? Where when they get it, they're getting into that age when you're in your 30s.
Yes.
That's where you can hit the wall and just say, let it go. And that's what happened to me. And my kids aren't going to do that, because they come home and they better be able to outlift me when they're, 30 years younger. So that's what keeps me motivated. Be an example for your family and others.
I like that. And then that took you down the path of bodybuilding as well, correct? And you got into competitions. And all of this is, and perhaps maybe to get your perspective, how does mastering your body allow you to master your mind? And then you integrate that also with faith. What's the intersection between the physical well-being, the mental well-being, and the spiritual, the faith side of things? How does faith play into your entrepreneurial journey?
Yeah, I think it all is about discipline, right? Where you discipline your body. You get up and you do that calisthenics in the morning. You work out at lunch. For me anyway, that's what it's just a known fact. I've got past that resistance where I don't even think about it. So, and then I think that transitions to my scripture where I read the Bible every morning, where it's just like it just is. It happens every day. It's just the habits that you form, and trying to stack habits and get better and better with good habits and eliminate the bad stuff. That's the progression. And I think your physical health is an awesome laboratory for the rest of your life. The other parts of your life, that if you're disciplining your body and doing stuff that's hard, that nobody wants to do. Nobody wants to dead hang, or do squats and stuff that's hard, and you go ahead and do it anyway. It takes the sting out of when you're an entrepreneur and you're stepping out to make that call to somebody that you don't know where it's going to go, or it's a must win, to get this deal done, or you're starting a new project and you got to write a check. It's a discipline, and I think the physical health is a great place to start.
I've always said, for those that want to self-develop, they're into personal development, here, go work out, go cold plunge, and become an entrepreneur. You're going to learn more about yourself in ways that you didn't even think. You're going to do things that you didn't even think were possible. And then you connect the faith aspect to this, because you're also now playing and collaborating together with a higher power. I think that's a huge multiplier in and of itself. As we wrap up here, I'm very interested in not necessarily who someone has been or who they even are right now. I'm more interested in helping them discover who they can become, who are they being called to become, who is the next level Tom Fedro?
Hey, next level, I've just been enjoying being an entrepreneur, but I'm going to be like you, and look at exiting some business here over the next several years. But I want to become a leader of folks that are searching. I've got another book in my mind. It's called the SCAN Protocol, SKAN, and it's based on Matthew 7:7. Seek and you shall find, knock it shall be open, ask you shall receive. And then I put an N on there. Now's the time, because you can't sit around. Now is the time for action, right? And to be able to incorporate biblical principles into your life and the success that you can have in business. A lot of the stuff that we talk about in masterminds and from motivational gurus, it all comes back to biblical principles that were talked about thousands of years ago, and that's the rock. You can't go wrong. And so there's a whole process and a platform that I'm working on there, where I'm hoping to be able to help people do what we've talked about, to avoid the pain, some of the pain that we both went through, and have some tools that they can use every single day to make that happen, and have the accountability, the radical accountability, to make sure you stay on track.
I love that. Seek, ask, knock. And the question then is, why are you not seeking? Why are you not asking? Why are you not knocking? And why not start with that right now? What would be the one thing that you would recommend someone who is watching or listening? And I love the framework. I love the way that you're taking your past experience and turning that into purpose to help others level up. What would you recommend for someone, another entrepreneur who's watching or listening, that they got this far in the conversation? What's the one thing they can do next to seek, to ask, to knock?
Well, I think you got to step back and really reflect on where you're spending your time. Look at your calendar and where are your priorities? How is your relationship with your spouse or your significant other, your family? How is it on a scale of 1 to 10? Look at yourself in the mirror. How do you feel about your health? How do you feel about where you are physically? And what are you doing about it? And then your business. Get your priorities straight. Business will take care of itself. Believe me, I've been there.
Well, Tom, thank you so much for the wisdom that you have shared, to seek, to ask, to knock, to do it now. If someone wants to continue the conversation that we've started here, what's the best way for them to reach out and to seek, to ask, and knock on your door and make that connection?
Yeah, give me a shout, Tom at tomfedro.com. Shoot me an email. That's probably the fastest way, or you can go to my website, tomfedro.com, and hit me there. But love to talk to anybody about this stuff. I think it's very exciting, and everybody has a purpose in life, and it's a matter of just getting your priorities straight and making it happen.
There you go, Tom. Thank you so much for joining me for another episode of the Level Up Business Podcast and for your wisdom. I appreciate you, buddy.
Right on. Appreciate you, and congratulations. Love where you're going, brother.
Hey, it's JR. Before we wrap up, I have one more question for you. Are you a visionary entrepreneur who wants to elevate your brand and expand your influence to increase your impact? If this is you, you're the reason we're on a mission to amplify the voices of visionary entrepreneurs by unlocking their wisdom, sharing their stories, and publishing their books. So, when you are ready to level up your business and your life, send me a text to 832-240-1922. That's because I want to teach you to amplify your voice so that your mission and message are seen, known, and heard by those who need your help the most.